Prologue. This time, she was going to do it. She only had one chance, a tiny, desperate window of opportunity. She didn't want to think about the consequences of failure, but anything was better than where she was now. Lying on the cold, concrete floor, Chloe Terry kept absolutely still. She forced her breathing to be slow and squeezed her eyes closed. If she could have, she would have slowed the frantic beating of her heart. She heard footsteps, heavy and regular, treading toward the door. And then she heard the heavy metallic clang as the solid door slammed shut, plunging her prison into darkness. She waited and counted to 5 with shaky, gasping breaths to make sure that he'd gone. Around her she heard soft sounds, ragged breathing. Nobody knew she was doing this. Nobody had seen what she managed to do earlier today while the door was open and he'd been bringing in a new prisoner. She hadn't wanted to tell anyone because speaking to fellow captives was discouraged, and she was sure he had cameras and microphones in the bunker. A couple of days ago, they'd managed whispered introductions of first names and where they were from before he'd burst in angrily. Since then, she'd been very careful about what she'd shared and who she'd spoken to, although she had tried her best to plan. But it would be better for everyone to believe she'd just managed to get the door open and done it on impulse. Chloe sprang to her feet, shaking all over with terror and tension, clinging to the hope that what she had done might somehow have worked. "You have to get out. You have to," she whispered to herself. Stumbling in the darkness, she rushed to the door, turned the handle, and tugged, hoping and praying that the foil wrapper she'd saved from yesterday's food and had managed to wedge into the door lock while his back was turned would have done what she hoped. Pulling the handle down as far as she could, Chloe hauled with all her might on the door, and it opened. Around her she heard gasps of astonishment as the heavy door moved, easing open on its hinges in a creaky sound she was now familiar with, because although she wasn't sure how long she'd been imprisoned here, maybe a week, maybe more, it had opened and closed numerous times. Now, for the first time, it was open without him standing, framed in the doorway, that familiar and threatening sight that made her feel sick with dread. Outside was almost as dark, but there was a faint pinpoint of light, enough to see by as she rushed down the narrow passage, the floor cold under her bare feet. Her heart was racing. Could it be possible? Was she going to escape? Running down the corridor, she felt totally disoriented as she came to a branch. Which way should she go? Where was the exit? She was in an underground maze and needed to find the way out. Chloe felt panic surge. She couldn't let him catch her now. Which way? Choosing one at random, she raced along the corridor, feeling overwhelmed by panic and fear at what she was doing and the consequence of failure. Wrong way! There was a heavy door up ahead. That was where the sliver of light was, meaning that it wasn't coming from outside at all. And worse still, whoever was behind that door must have heard the thudding of her bare feet, because she heard a man's shout.